because guilt is actually a very helpful tool. We feel guilt when we act in a way that's not in line with our true values. But guilt is only helpful if it's coming from a true value of ours and not just a... Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. My name is Brooks Herbis, and I'm an online fitness, nutrition, and mindset coach who's here to help you simplify and make sense out of the all too confusing fitness and nutrition industry. Let's be real, there's a lot of conflicting information online, and it can be hard to know what's legit and who to trust. In every episode, I'll be sharing the science and psychology behind health, fitness, and long-lasting behavior change. But I'll also be sharing real-life practical application, because all of the best info in the world only matters if you can actually apply it to your real life. So grab a coffee, water, glass of wine, or lace up your walking shoes, and let's dive in. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. Today we're talking all things guilt, because this is something that comes up pretty frequently when we're trying to build habits, or probably on your fat loss journey to date. Like, how many of you can relate to feeling guilty for skipping a workout or eating something quote unquote off planned, even though maybe deep down you aren't really sure why it mattered so much? Like, maybe you were on vacation and you had full intentions of enjoying yourself. Before you went into vacation, you were like, this is a really special occasion. I just want to let loose. I just want to relax. I've been really busy. I just want to not even think about my health and fitness goals. But then towards the end of your trip, or maybe when you got back, there was this tiny bit of guilt that kind of crept in, even though you said that you were going to enjoy yourself. There's still that little guilt that's coming up. And the guilt that you're feeling is likely some tension between your true values versus chasing a should. Which is why when you're on a health and fitness journey, it is crucial to identify what your true value is versus what is just a should. Because guilt is actually a very helpful tool. We feel guilt when we act in a way that's not in line with our true values. But guilt is only helpful if it's coming from a true value of ours and not just a should. So there is helpful guilt and there is unhelpful guilt. So if we go back to that vacation example, let's say that this was actually your fourth trip in 2 months, like you're deep in wedding season, you're traveling almost every single weekend, and you had identified going into this trip that losing fat was important to you, and you really wanted to stay the course on this trip. You had a planned outline, but then when you got there, you threw it out the window. In that instance, guilt would be helpful. You acted in a way that was against your goals and values, and the guilt that you're feeling is likely going to help you act in a different way in the future. But on the flip side, and what often comes up a lot with our health and fitness journeys is, let's say that this same trip was the only vacation that you were taking this year. You had identified in advance this trip was a really special occasion. You wanted to be able to enjoy it to the fullest, but after you got back, you had a lot of guilt. You should have worked out more. You shouldn't have eaten so many treats. You should have had more salads instead of the fried chicken fingers at the airport. That is when guilt isn't helpful. When it's based on a should rather than what you identified as your true value before you left for the trip, which was enjoying yourself. So guilt, like I said, can be a helpful tool, but only when we're talking about true values. So how do you identify a true value versus just a should? Because these shoulds pop up pretty often on our health and fitness journey, especially if you fall into that high achieving perfectionism bucket that a lot of my coaching clients do. Because a lot of times we're trying to hold ourselves to a really high standard, and we're thinking that we should do things because of this high standard, or we should do things based off things we saw on social media, when in reality, it's not even important to us. It's not even a true value. So how do we differentiate between the two? A true value is something that you've identified as really important to you rather than something you just think you should be doing. These are core principles or beliefs that genuinely matter to you. Things like health, energy, longevity, showing up for your family. So when we think about health and fitness specifically, true values that you might have right now on your journey could be things like, I want to feel strong and energetic so I can keep up with my kids. I want to be present and make memories without food being the focus. I want to be healthy so that I can enjoy my life as I age. Those could all be core values that you have about your health and fitness journey. And identifying your core values is key because those really help to guide your decisions either overall or in the moment. So continuing to come back to these core values is really important. So maybe even pause this podcast episode, go into your notes app, think about what your core values are. Why are you on this fitness journey? What is really important to you? Is it having that energy? Is it being able to be present? Is it being healthy as you age? What are the things that are really important to you, and why are you trying to build these habits, create this lifestyle in the first place? So really spend some time identifying what your core values are. Now, we need to think about why guilt comes into play, whether it's from a should or from our core values, because guilt stems from feeling like you're not acting in a way that's in line with your expectations, either from yourself or from others. So helpful guilt is guilt that comes from when you act against a value that you truly care about. So when we go back to that vacation example, if we said that we were going to stick with our health and fitness goals because losing fat was a really important value to us at the time, that guilt is coming from a good place. It's coming because we acted in a way that wasn't in line with something that we really cared about. But we also have should guilt, which is really based on those external pressures or those rules that you've kind of imposed on yourself, whether, again, it's from social media or from your own high expectations. Things like, I should be working out 6 days a week, when honestly, there's no need for that. And in order to stay to your core value of being strong to keep up with your kids, you don't need to work out 6 days a week. So where is that 6 days a week coming from? It's an unrealistic expectation that you're trying to hold yourself to. It's a should. So true value guilt would be things like, I miss my morning walk and I know that it helps me feel mentally clear. Should guilt is, I skipped a workout and now I feel like I'm failing because I should never miss a workout. So we really need to, as we're having these feelings of guilt pop up, we really need to identify if it's coming from a place of helpful guilt and it's because we're acting in a way that's not in line with our true values, or if it's unhelpful guilt that's coming from a should. And I know that sometimes these things can have a lot of crossover and it can be hard to identify what is a true value of mine versus what is a should. So some things to ask yourself is, why does this matter to me? What does this bring to my life? So for example, if you want to get strong so that you can keep up with your kids, you're prioritizing strength training because it makes you feel strong and confident and it allows you to have that energy to keep up with your kids. That sounds really important to you. Versus if you're thinking about a should, we really need to identify, like, does this align with what you actually want or value? So an example of a should would be like, I feel like I should run because everyone says it's the best cardio, but I don't like running. I like walking. That's probably not a true value then. It's probably a should. And when we're running into these shoulds, we need to think about reframing them. And we need to think about reframing them as a true value if they even are a value in the first place. We can either eliminate it and question and ask yourself, is this really true? Do I really care about this? Or we can think about shifting it. So instead of things like I should meal prep every week, reframe it to I value feeling organized with my meals, so I need to find a system that works for me. It's not just these like shoulds, these external pressures that you place on yourself. It's getting clear about what actually matters to you and what's actually important to you. So, as we're going through this, write down your top 3 values that you outlined as really important to you. Then I want you to identify at least one action that you could take daily or weekly that's really in line with each of these. So then when those feelings of guilt pop up, ask yourself, is this guilt coming from a true value? Is it one of those true values that I identified? Or is it coming from a should? If it's a value and you're like, this is actually really important to me, I'm disappointed in myself, I should have acted in a different way, that's helpful guilt, and you can use that guilt as a signal to make adjustments. So, okay, I acted in a way that wasn't in line with my true values. Moving forward, I should change X, Y, and Z. If, as you're diving into that guilt, you realize that it's coming from a should, it's coming from something that doesn't actually matter to you, it's not actually one of those core values that you identified, that's when you want to challenge it and ultimately ditch it. See if you can let it go. See if you can reframe it to a different value. If not, just let it go. And lastly, it's really important to give yourself grace during this. Guilty feelings can be part of the health and fitness process because, again, guilt, when looking at our true values, is helpful. Guilt is meant to allow us to make sure that we continue taking action towards our true values. So guilt isn't necessarily this bad thing that we never want to feel. It's okay if some guilt pops up from time to time. But when it does, I don't want you to pour into these negative feelings. Recognize it, understand where it's coming from, make sure it's coming from a true value, and then give yourself grace. Recognize like you're not going to be perfect on your health and fitness journey, and what guilt is doing is helping to guide you to make decisions that are more in line with your true values moving forward. So don't feel even worse when you have these feelings of guilt or, frustration even because you're acting in a way that's not in line with your goals. Allow yourself to use it as a tool. Allow yourself to recognize like, hey, okay, this means I'm not acting in a way that's in line with my values. Maybe it's time to make some adjustments. So really focus on lessening your guilt as time goes on, because as time goes on, you're getting better at acting in a way that's in line with your values. You're getting better at identifying what are the things I need to change so that I can act in a way that's in line with my values. That is how we use guilt to our advantage. That's how we make sure that guilt is actually helping us, as opposed to it just being this tool that leaves us feeling really negative around shoulds, or we just feel like it's really unhelpful in general. So guilt can be helpful when it comes to our health and fitness journey, but only when it's in line with our true values, not a should. So spend some time this week reflecting on what your true values are. And when you have these moments of guilt pop up, really challenge yourself to identify if it's coming from one of those true values or if it's coming from a should that maybe isn't serving you all that well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you being here listening every single week. If you know that there is someone in your life who struggles with guilt or perfectionism in your health and fitness journey, please consider sharing this episode with them. The best way for this podcast to grow is when you guys share it with your friends and family so that I can help more people. Now, next week, we are talking all about 3 reasons you have been stuck on your fat loss journey. So I hope you guys tune in, and I will talk to you all so soon.